Hello and welcome to Stand in the Gap. I'm Sam Rohrer, and I'm going to be joined as normal by Pastor Isaac Crockett, as today on this program and the next, our theme is going to be saving the persecuted Christians. Now today and next week, we're going to focus on the plight of Christians around the world, as according to Aid to the Church in Need, which released its biannual report on religious freedom across the world, in November of 2018 is when they released this. They said over 300 million Christians experience persecution for their faith right now as we do this program. And the numbers are not going down. They're sadly going up. And for those influenced by a Judeo-Christian worldview, a biblical view of life, we, those people who believe those things, feel a moral duty to identify and stop abuse, to stop rape and torture and acts of aggression against fellow human beings. But when atheism, communism, Islam, and certain other ideologies are the primary influence in thinking and government policies, persecution, imprisonment, and death are the results. Now, over the recent years, the incidence of Christian persecution in particular has skyrocketed, with few government leaders doing anything about it. But thankfully, an effort to change this is happening. Now, on Monday of September 23rd of 2019, just a few weeks ago from the taping of this program, President Trump convened an unprecedented global call to protect religious freedom at the United Nations General Assembly meetings. And at this meeting, the President stood before the United Nations in an historic fashion on this issue. In fact, he was the first American president to ever address this emergency. And he made some amazing statements to the world in regard of the plight of Christian persecution. He challenged the world's leaders to stand up and do what is morally right in regard to stopping government-sanctioned persecution of Christians. And among other powerful statements, he said this: "Today, I ask all nations to join us in this urgent moral duty. We ask the governments of the world to honor the eternal right of every person to follow their conscience, live by their faith, and to give glory to God." This powerful statement put the world's leaders on notice, and it placed before them the challenge to do what governments are established by God to do, and that is to protect the innocent and to bring justice to those who do evil. Our guest for today's theme is a foremost spokesperson and advocate to stop Christian persecution. She's a friend of the American Pastors Network and Stand in the Gap. Her name is Dede Laugesen, and she's the executive director of the organization called Save the Persecuted Christians, an organization of which I'm proud to serve in an advisory role. So with that introduction to the program, Isaac, let me go to you right now and have you kick off this program, because past generations in our country, the greatest generation as an example, have fought in world wars because of massive persecution. Whether it was the Jews and Hitler or wherever it may be, people were being killed. They were being persecuted in many respects. You're part of the millennial generation. Generation Z is coming up. But your generation, by and large, except from reading about it in history books, have really not been a part of witnessing persecution on a grand scale. My question to you is, do you believe or perceive that Generation Z and millennial generation understand the degree of persecution as we're going to lay it out today, and what they think about it if they did know about it?
I don't know the statistics on that. I could just say, because of the internet, I think there's a lot more of that out there. My generation, we grew up with 9/11, and so we saw this jihad against evil America, and we grew up also having the internet. Al Gore created the internet for us. But I remember before the internet, a missionary from the Philippines, a Filipino pastor, showing slides of persecution, and it was shocking to everyone there. We didn't know such a thing existed in the world. My guess would be that your children might know more about persecution than you did at their age because of the internet. Unfortunately, watching all these ISIS beheadings and things like that, I think it's almost overwhelming. There's so much information, so much of it out there, that maybe it actually has the opposite effect, that it's just kind of flooded away. I don't know. That would just be my guess.
That's interesting. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to talk about this today because I don't know what you think and how aware you are of the degree of Christian persecution around the world, but it is extensive. And we're going to be talking in just a second with our guest, Dede Laugesen, as we go into further discussion about the president, what he said at the United Nations, why he said it, and all of those things that lead up to understanding. Our theme for the day is saving the persecuted Christians.
Around the world, the persecution of Christians is greater than at any time in the history of the world. Even in America, we're seeing the early signs of persecution. But what is true persecution? How should we prepare? What should we think? You can find out right now.
God's judgment on nations always brings with it the persecution of God's people. It is happening around the world, and it is increasingly happening right here in America. And unless God intervenes, I believe it will intensify greatly right here in America to everyone sitting here.
The concise biblical presentation on persecution can be yours right now for a suggested donation of just $20. Go to our website at AmericanPastorsNetwork.net or write to us today.
Well, welcome back to Stand in the Gap. And we're going to get right into our program right now with our special guest. I'd like to invite in at this moment right now, Dede Laugesen. She is the Executive Director of Save the Persecuted Christians. Dede, thanks for being with us today.
Oh, I'm very thankful to be here, Pastor Sam. Thank you very much.
Dede, I'd like you, as we begin this program, take just a minute or two, share briefly the mission of Save the Persecuted Christians, which, by the way, for those who are listening, is a fairly new organization, and the emphasis on this theme is something that's, frankly, should have been done by others a long time ago, but Save the Persecuted Christians now doing, and you're leading this organization. Tell us just a bit about the mission.
Save the Persecuted Christians started as an informal pickup team of civil society and faith leaders who were concerned that Americans don't know about the global crisis of anti-Christian violence raging in a record number of countries worldwide. These civil society leaders head up organizations that provide the symptomatic relief for our persecuted brothers and sisters in lands overseas. But here in the United States, they battle against gaining the support they need to provide this relief because Americans don't know, and so they're not supporting the causes that these leaders are working so hard to battle back against. So this is a coalition of more than 200 leaders who work together with a grassroots of thousands of American citizens concerned for our brothers and sisters who are suffering by the hundreds of millions. The kind of violence that is, it's horrific. And so we come together to inform Americans and to also support our leaders in holding the persecutors accountable by creating real costs for their crimes against humanity.
Dede, thank you for what you're doing, and thanks for being on the program with us here at Stand in the Gap. We are so excited to be able to talk with you today and to let our viewers know about Save the Persecuted Christians, savethepersecutedchristians.org, good website there where you have a lot of information. Before we get into that, you said you want to bring attention to the persecuted church. Let people know, give the information of what's actually happening out there, truth. I mean, the Bible is clear on that, and that's what we try to stand for, the truth. And so seeing President Trump go into the United Nations and just kind of open this up in a place where many times it's been almost ignored, almost just looked right over, was again an exciting moment for us to see that a president would shine the spotlight on it. But that's exactly what you're doing at Save the Persecuted Church, and that's what you're doing with Join the Movement, the Save Us movement that you're doing. And so I want to kind of get your opinion on what's happening, like at the UN with the speech that Donald Trump made, and see, what you think about that. But before that, I do want to just kind of shine the light on what you guys are talking about by sharing just a short clip of a video that was put together there by you folks at SaveThePersecutedChristians.org. So this time we'll play about a minute clip of one of your videos.
Too few Americans know that 300 million Christians in a record number of countries around the world are being subjected to brutal human rights abuses and even genocidal violence by authoritarian regimes and radical groups. Western media, many elected officials, and even some faith leaders have been silent for too long about this anti-Christian plague of oppression and death sweeping the globe. These crimes against humanity have been allowed to fester and proliferate. Current data and anecdotal information from reputable sources, including the United States government, show this may be the most dangerous time in history to be a Christian.
Dede, I guess it's the images, especially in some of what you all show, that maybe are a wake-up call for all of us. These numbers are horrific, the descriptions are horrific, but it almost seems like we just get so flooded with it we can't understand. And when you see some of those graphic images and you talk with people who have survived some of the brutal torturing that they have, it really starts to bring it home. And so, I would like to see what you think about what President Donald Trump was doing at the United Nations not too long ago, and what he had talked about. Sam quoted from some of that. And I guess I'd just like to pick your brain a little bit, because you've seen so much, you've been pushing so much to do this, to get somebody in position like the president. And so I would wondering, do you think he knows about some of the things, the statistics, as well as the situations that you guys were showing in the video? And I guess I also wonder what you think prompted him to take this time to go in and present this to the United Nations.
I don't think these are just talking points for this president. This president has been advocating for the protection of religious freedom since the beginning of his administration. He made it a priority in his 2017 National Security Strategy. He elevated religious liberty and the protection and promotion of it in the world a national security priority at that point. And he has hosted 2 ministerials to protect and advance religious freedom worldwide. He is taking the leadership on this. And to stand on the world stage at the UN this past month and make a call for other countries to join him in the protection of religious freedom was a very bold and strong statement to the world that this really is a priority with him. I do believe that he does understand very well what is happening to Christians on a massive scale, the persecution of Christians reaching hundreds of millions of people who wake up every single day to face brutal realities and threats against their lives and livelihoods. I believe that this president is very well informed.
Dede, I was in office for about 18 years in the Pennsylvania House of Representatives. I've stood in front of groups. The president stood in front of a group. I've not stood in front of the United Nations like he did. But I can say this, making a bold statement of that type that the president did either comes from a view of political pragmatism, that you're going to gain something by it, or it is born of conviction. I think you are describing that the president is being driven more by conviction in this matter than pragmatism. Would I be right in saying that?
I think so. He hosted persecuted people in the Oval Office this summer during the Ministerial to Advance Religious Freedom, and at least half of those were Christians in the room. He said that religious freedom, the protection of it, is very important to him. He even said that it is the principle upon which all the rest of our freedoms rest. And he said, without it, nothing else really matters. And he told the people in the room, I will stand by you forever. And so I believe that for this president, religious freedom and protection and promotion of it in the world really does matter, because he's very much like a father. He's looking out for his family here in the United States, but he knows that you cannot have your home in a dangerous neighborhood. And with the advance and intensification of oppression, intolerance, and persecution of people of faith around the world, we live in a more and more dangerous neighborhood globally.
That's a great way to put it, Dede. We live in a dangerous neighborhood and so forth. Now, the president, he mentioned the White House gathering. He also mentioned the name of someone that our viewers would probably recognize, and that was Andrew Brunson. Andrew Brunson was in Turkey. He was a pastor. Talk just briefly, if you could, about the president's role in seeking the release of that individual, because that goes to speaking to the issue that the president's decision to speak boldly at the United Nations was not a first time, but in fact is part of a long record. Share with that story, if you could, with our viewers.
Yes, with Pastor Brunson, President Trump used the tools that Save the Persecuted Christians has been advocating to put pressure upon these foreign governments who are state sponsors of persecution, or they tolerate it within their countries. So President Trump took up the case of the American pastor Andrew Brunson, who had served for more than 20 years in Turkey. He got caught up after the coup attempt and was arrested for Christianization. They were actually saying that he was committing terrorist acts because he was promoting Christianity within Turkey. And so he was imprisoned, and President Trump, in every conversation he had with President Erdogan, he insisted that they release Pastor Andrew Brunson. And then he started using sanctions, economic sanctions, and threats to military equipment sales to Turkey, and really was driving the economy down into the dumps when President Erdogan was forced to release Pastor Andrew Brunson. We call it here at Save the Persecuted Christians the Brunson treatment. And we say that other countries also must be using these same tactics, looking at foreign aid, looking at military sales, and economic sanctions, access to international markets, all of those things when it comes to holding state sponsors of persecution accountable for these crimes.
Dede, as we look back at some of the words that President Trump used to the United Nations, he actually talked about giving glory to God, and he talked about these persecuted Christians in such an honorable way. Are there any other highlights from that speech that you would like to maybe talk about or bring up for our viewers? That we only have about a minute and a half left here, but anything that you would like to bring out from his speech that would point to hopefully a good direction that maybe we are going in, and hopefully sort of a success story from SaveThePersecutedChristians.org.
We were very happy to see President Trump bring up the specific issue of Christians suffering. Christians are the most persecuted religious group in the world by far and away. 83% of the world's population lives in countries where religious freedom is oppressed or even banned. But for Christians, 65% of those suffering persecution are Christians. And President Trump spoke incredulously about the 11 Christians a day who are dying for following Jesus. So it was very heartening to hear him speak specifically about Christians, because what Christians are facing is not comparable to the intolerance that other faith traditions are experiencing. We are experiencing a holocaust of Christians in this day and age. It really is the most dangerous time in history to be a Christian.
The Apostle Paul warned his protege in the faith, his son in the faith, Timothy, that everyone, that all who will live a godly life shall suffer persecution. And I wonder, our viewers watching right now, number one, are you aware of the persecution that's going on? Again, we want to thank you, Dede, for what you're doing to bring this to the forefront. But then also to ask yourself as a viewer, am I ready? Could I be one of those 11? And what do I do when persecution comes more than just to my neighborhood, but to my house? And so we have some more information we want to talk about in this program today. We're going to take a brief commercial break, and we're going to come back and talk more about that. And hopefully you can think about what the Lord is doing in your life to prepare you to help those who are being persecuted and to be prepared for when the time comes that you and I are also persecuted. We'll be right back after this timeout.
Stand in the Gap is produced and recorded in the studios of WBPH Philadelphia, positively different television. To watch archives of this program, go to WBPH.org.
As we now conclude this program, this part one of Saving the Persecuted Christians, I hope that you've been moved already at what we've discussed and perhaps are a bit more aware of the extent of Christian persecution worldwide. In part two of next week's program, we're going to go far more into detail and tell you where it's happening and how it's happening, at the hands of whom it is happening, all of which is important to know. But Dede, I would like to conclude with you in the next couple of minutes. I don't ever like to take our viewers to the point of information without some place to go. Tell us briefly how our viewers, how they can become a part of Save the Persecuted Christians. Maybe you have a website that you're offering that has information that they can become a part of. If you could, share that with our viewers at this time.
Sure. Your viewers can join the Save Us movement at savethepersecutedchristians.org. And they can order up a banner to hang in front of their house of worship. It's called the Paul Revere Save Us banner. It really alerts people passing by and coming into worship that there is a problem, that anti-Christian persecution and violence is raging around the world at savethepersecutedchristians.org.
Okay, and then Dede, thank you for that, savethepersecutedchristians.org, but you also have a website for a news service that has aggregated information that people can access as well, don't you?
Yes, we pull all kinds of stories together from all around the world at christianpersecutionnews.com. And we encourage people to come here regularly, to follow the news, to get to know your brothers and sisters who are suffering, and to be able to share these stories with your family and your friends.
So just one clarification before we wrap up the program. On that site of Christian, again, get the title right.
christianpersecutionnews.com.
Okay, when they go there, Dede, they will see updated articles from around the world that you are accumulating and aggregating. So would I say perhaps that if someone wants to know about Christian persecution, that probably would be the best, most complete site to go to?
Yes, absolutely. Nobody else is doing what we're doing with christianpersecutionnews.com. Pulls together stories of anti-Christian violence all around the world. You can also access all of the reports that are detailing what's happening to Christians.
Well, Dede, thank you very much. And ladies and gentlemen, as you watch this is part one of a two-part program. And we're going to come back next week. I want you to make sure you come back and you join us at this same time to get the conclusion of this program, where we're going to share a lot more details, the countries that are the worst persecutors, the ideologies that are the worst ideologies that drive the persecution, and again, what you can do about it. And I'd just like to offer right now and suggest that if you're watching us, you can order from us this DVD that I prepared a couple years ago on how to prepare for persecution. Isaac mentioned it. If you're watching this, We in America have been spared persecution. The rest of the world has not. But we will be facing it as well. Jesus says that we will. You can purchase this for a gift of $20 or more. You can go on the site, on the screen. It tells you how to obtain this. I would encourage you to do that. It'll be very, very helpful to you this week. Well, thanks for watching us today and being a part of Stand in the Gap. Let us know that you are watching. Go and perhaps order this DVD. Understand what you can do personally, and pray for us. Pray for Save the Persecuted Christians and what they're doing. And until next week, I'd ask you all, stand in the gap for truth wherever you are.